All right, welcome into the baseball hour. Here we go. You got me for 30 minutes tonight. We'll go right up to Celtics pregame at 6:30, followed by Celtics-Cavs game one of their Eastern Conference semifinal series over at the TD Garden. Again, you can catch all that right here on 98.5 The Sports Hub. But here's where we're going to start with the Red Sox tonight, who are in Atlanta. In Atlanta to play the Braves for 2 games before returning home to Fenway Park. This weekend, the Washington Nationals will be in. I'm sure you've all set that on your calendars. The Washington Nationals will blow, but that is neither here nor there. The Red Sox are in Atlanta tonight to play the Braves. Cutter Crawford on the mound, Nick Pivetta on the mound tomorrow. So here's a question for you if you're a Red Sox fan and you see this matchup. Would it tell you something if they beat the Braves? Would it tell you something if the Red Sox beat the Braves or at least show well in these 2 games in Atlanta? So Atlanta, to me, is one of the real marquee franchises in the game now. Dodgers, obviously, probably number 1 at the top of that list. A lot of people believe Atlanta's the next best bet to win a championship. The Braves have built it largely internally. Frankly, the Atlanta Braves are what you want the Red Sox to be. It's what the Red Sox want to be. They have subsequently signed their best prospects to long-term, team-friendly deals. Players get their money at an earlier stage. They don't have to wait for free agency. All of the above makes all the sense in the world. So it's a good test. And the question is, how are the Red Sox going to fare? 617-779-0985 is your number. Phone lines are open right away. Again, we're only with you for a half hour tonight. And I bring you back to a comment that Alex Cora made over the weekend, the finale of a series in Minnesota. Red Sox lost the first 2. They won the last game. I've told you over the last couple of days, I think Cora's mindset, his attitude, totally different than what it was a year ago. He sounds more content. I would say mentally, emotionally, psychologically, all of that. Cora in a much better place than he has been in the last 2 or 3 years. And maybe that's because he is in better communication or has a better relationship with his general manager. Maybe it's because he knows he's getting out of Dodge at the end of the year, whatever it is. Cora sounds like a happier guy. So they took 1 out of 3 against the Twins. Here's what Cora said after the finale.
Tough weekend with basically 3 bullpen games in 4 days, and some guys became big leaguers this weekend. Like they had to pitch them back to back. These are the cool ones. Like I know we lost 2 out of 3, but we play good baseball throughout. But as a manager, these are very gratifying because you use everybody. You start playing Sunday, on Saturday, midway through the game, and how are we gonna accomplish this? And losing 2 out of 3 sucks here, but winning this one is very, very gratifying. It took a total team effort. Coaches did an outstanding job, and nice, a happy flight, and be ready for Atlanta.
So this is, to me, indicative of how things are now with the Red Sox, that the goals have been completely reset. The standards are completely different. Normally, the Red Sox will go into a place and lose 2 out of 3 and be dissatisfied with the outcome, whether they won the finale or not. Now they go and they lose 2 out of 3 and they're content because Cora is looking at it with a totally different perspective than he's looked at it in the past. So they beat the Twins in the finale. Great. And Cora calls that win gratifying because they had to win it as a team. They don't have the talent necessarily to be able to compete with some of the better clubs, the real championship clubs or championship caliber clubs, the elite teams in Major League Baseball, like the Braves. So now they go to Atlanta. Jimmy Stewart, let me ask you quickly. If the Reds, it's only a 2-game series, but if you examine this series and you're a Red Sox fan, you say, okay, we're going in there, we're going to play just 2 against the Braves. You'd be happy with a split, wouldn't you?
100% yes.
Okay, I feel the same way. You take a split of a 2-game series in Atlanta, who wouldn't want that? I mean, to me, that's a realistic, reasonable goal. Here's the other thing. The Red Sox have been able to, despite the fact that, as Cora mentioned in that cut that we just played, despite the fact that the Red Sox have had to use relievers, bullpen games in the last 3 or 4 days, they go into Atlanta now coming off an off day. They didn't play last night. And they also have 2 legitimate starters going. Now, in one case, Nick Pivetta tomorrow night hasn't pitched in a while. He's coming off the disabled list, but Cutter Crawford goes tonight. Cutter Crawford has pitched well. You should be able to come out of there with a split. I don't think that that's an unreasonable expectation. And again, I would tell you that if the Red Sox are going to be any sort of surprise in this season, and we'll see how that shakes out in the longer term, but if they are going to be a surprise, then performing well in series like this would make a difference. And splitting with the Braves would mean 2-3 in a 5-game road trip, 3 at Minnesota, who was the hottest team in baseball going in, and 2 in Atlanta. I wouldn't call it an easy trip. It's not exactly murderer's row because of the Twins, who are pretty good, but not great. If it were the Dodgers and Braves, we could call it murderer's row. It's not. But to go 2-3 on a road trip like that, let alone 3-2, if you can somehow sweep the Braves, not bad. Again, now that you've gotten through the harder part of it, you didn't really have your pitching set up on that first weekend in Minnesota. Now you do. Secondly, and there is another element to this trip that does interest me. Jimmy, do you know who's pitching for the Braves tomorrow night?
Oh, isn't it one of their aces?
Chris Sale.
Oh, yeah, he was an ace at one time.
Chris Sale.
Who ran from the media today.
So he did?
Yeah, he ran from the Boston writers today who were waiting for him.
Okay, so there you go.
I'm surprised he wasn't on a bike trying to ride by.
So interesting. I did not know that, so thank you for sharing that. Sale, who was, I will say, generally a stand-up guy when he dealt with the media in Boston, spoke with reporters, good start or bad, was always there to answer questions. Jimmy just said that he dodged the media, which I find interesting. So my guess is that Chris Sale is very happy to be a member of the Atlanta Braves. He's playing for a team that is vying for a championship. I am curious on some level too, Jimmy, as to what Chris Sale's legacy is in Boston. So do you think Chris Sale will be remembered fondly? Do you think Chris Sale will be remembered as cashing in on a big contract and giving them nothing in the last 4 years that he was here, 5 years that he was here? Do you think that, Cora raised an interesting question when he was asked about Sale over the weekend, which we'll play for you, by the way, when we come back in a moment. But Cora wondered about the reception that Sale would receive when the Braves come to Boston in June. So about a month from now, June 4th and 5th, again, it's a Tuesday and Wednesday, oddly enough, Atlanta will come into Fenway Park. Everybody gets a freaking video now, so I would imagine the Red Sox are going to put some sort of video on the scoreboard to acknowledge the World Series championship in 2018. I am curious as to how fans will receive and respond to Chris Sale. It's something else I want to throw out there for the purposes of tonight's program, and we'll take your thoughts on it. 617-779-0985. We'll kick it off tonight with Jake in Concord. Jake, go ahead.
Hey, man, thanks for taking the call. Yeah, I like the new tone that I feel like Cora has had since the team sort of went down the hill. I think that your depiction of it is, like, pretty accurate. I mean, he's playing with house money at this point. I think that to make himself a more attractive guy to be out there as a coach on the free market, I think that he's doing a good job talking up a lot of the young guys. And I think that it's a good tone setter for how the season's going to go. I don't know if they're going to make 500, but I'm happy to see that that's kind of changed the vibe, it seems like, in the clubhouse. Thanks.
Yeah, so, Jake, what I'll tell you is I'm pleasantly surprised by it. I think Cora wants out of here. I think he's been dissatisfied with the way the last couple of years have gone, and frankly, I can't blame him for it. There was nothing to be happy about. Cora came here with the idea of winning championships, plural. He had the kind of roster that was just stocked with talent, and he was the guy that was brought in to get them over the top. That was the whole challenge. He came here, he won a title. They kind of, I shouldn't say kind of, I don't want to say bottomed out the next year because that's a little too...
No, they punted on the next season, Tony. Like, they came into spring training like they were the cat's ass, and we're going to slow it down a little bit. We're going to ease into the season, and it cost Dave Dombrowski his job, presumably, although maybe there's a budgetary thing there. But they came into the defense of their world championships kind of like, we have our feet up. We won one. We'll ease into this season. We'll ease through it. And then look what happened. Dombrowski is fired. Cora is suspended. And now we're in a full reset. We're in a hard reset.
So it is amazing to me how the whole identity of the organization has changed, Jimmy, during his time here. He was brought in to win championships. He won one, and I just was not going to use the phrase bottomed out. They went 84 and 78. It's not like they went 60 and 102. But nonetheless, to your point, they came in cocky. They didn't win, and then he gets suspended. Then he came back, and the Red Sox really weren't the same organization anymore. They had a good year in 2021, but since that time, the thing has kind of fallen apart. Now it's maybe being put back together, and I think Cora's disposition, his demeanor has changed, which is good. It's changed for the better. But I do wonder if, if there's any way possible the Red Sox can keep him. And again, I doubt it.
Pay him.
I don't think it's that, because I think he's going to get the same money no matter where he goes, which is a lot. In other words, if they don't pay him, they have no chance. Okay, so they're going to have to pay him. But if the Red Sox pay him and someone else pays him and the money's the same, where's he going?
Somewhere else.
That's what I think. So to me, it's something to keep an eye on here as the season goes along. Thus far, I think Cora's done a pretty good job. His attitude's been good, but he's completely reset his expectations, maybe because he has to, because it's the only way he can manage without losing his mind. Chris Sale also on the table. I see a couple of you on the line already. When we come back, we'll tell you exactly. In fact, we'll play for you what Alex Cora said about Chris Sale, who was clearly one of his favorite players while Sale was here in Boston. That's when we come back.
He got the last one, and we asked a lot from him, not only on the field, but in the clubhouse, and he was great off the field. His family, they kept growing. He kept growing throughout the years. He was there for me when I was down there. He was. And the guy's special. I know people make jokes about him, the injuries and the bike and all that stuff, which I think, because this guy did everything possible to be on the field. And, he's pitching on Wednesday, and I can't wait for him to get back to Fenway and get the ovation he deserves, because out of all the guys here that have been part of this since 2018 all the way till now, he went through the up and downs, and he took his punches. But like I always said, nobody can take away that ring from 18.
People made fun of Chris Sale. Jimmy, did we make fun of Sale?
Oh, we buried him for the bike incident. We called BS on it.
I was being facetious.
Amongst other things that I'm sure we did.
So
Hi, Alex. Thanks for listening to the program. We love you.
I do think, though, that
I love you.
Chris Sale is sort of a fascinating case, because Cora clearly adores the guy. And I understand why. He was a manager's dream. Sale was accountable, preached the team concept. He was a competitive guy. I don't think any of that is untrue. The mistake for the Sale contract really falls on the Red Sox for giving it to him. But because of everything that went into it, he is sort of an interesting case. Like, you look at it and say, on the one hand, Chris Sale should be cheered when he comes back. On the other hand, he really had one of the worst contracts in baseball over the last 5 years of his career here, through no fault of his own, but he was never on the mound. The last time he really pitched any sort of meaningful game for the Red Sox was in 2021, I guess. But the fact of the matter is that after 2018, he really wasn't all that good. So I don't even have in front of me what his numbers were in 2021, which I'll look up.
He was 5-1 in 9 games started with a 3.61 ERA.
Okay, so he was okay that year, but again, it was he was injured that year as well. So he's just a hard guy to figure how you will remember him. To me, the ending was worse than the peak. Sale's best years here did not last very long. He was a bargain on that contract at the beginning, and I'm not saying I regret the trade, but I don't necessarily look at Chris Sale as being one of the great Red Sox aces in the last, call it, 40 years. If you start with Clemens, I always say that this line of kings that the Red Sox have had is really unlike any other, maybe in all of baseball. Clemens, Pedro, Schilling, Beckett, Lester, and I'm not telling you they're all equal, but that's a pretty good run of pitchers. The first three in particular, Clemens, Pedro, Schilling, pretty good. And then, say what you will about Beckett, his 07 postseason was as good as anyone I've ever seen. And then Lester was sort of a 1B type of ace, but in a big game, you'd pretty much give him the ball every bit as much as you would Beckett or Schilling. Beckett was a really good big game pitcher early in his career. So I just think remembering Sale's legacy is complicated, is how I would put it. I don't necessarily put him in the class as those other guys.
He's similar to John Lackey.
Better. Yeah, better. Wasn't as bad as Lackey here. Lackey's bad here was bad. But anyway, Paul in Blackstone, what do you got?
Hey, Tony. So a couple of things. It's really hard for me to separate the impact that Sale's contract had on what I perceive to be the Red Sox downstream long tail souring on big free agent pitchers. It's not Sale's fault, but I have a hard time not seeing him as a big part of the reason why Mookie Betts isn't here anymore.
Right.
And when he had that start, and I think it was in Worcester, it wasn't Pawtucket anymore, where he trashed the clubhouse after he couldn't locate his slider. I found that really off-putting and childish, and I think the guy deserves to be booed, right? People our age, we booed Roger Clemens, but I think the segment of fans that infest Fenway Park these days, the only people that will still buy tickets, the kind that sing Sweet Caroline when you're losing by 7 runs, are mostly going to cheer him.
So, Paul, look, my guess is you're probably right. You know, you win a World Series here. People are going to remember that. And again, maybe the highs outweigh the lows. I'll just tell you that Chris Sale spent more time here not pitching well or not pitching at all than he did pitching well. That's sort of how I'll say it. Now, again, in 2018, was he part of that? Of course. 12-4, 2.11 ERA. He got hurt late in the year. He ended up closing out the game of the World Series. So as Cora said, he threw the first pitch of that season. He threw the last pitch of that season. But that year is where the problem started. Incredibly, the Red Sox gave him another contract in the spring of 2019. We all knew that was a bad decision.
Tony, the Sale issue started at the end of 2017 when John Farrell kept Sale in games too long so that Chris Sale would get 300 strikeouts.
Right. So that's true, Jimmy. And the only thing is that, and I agree, that was where they started to wear him down. He made all 32 starts that year. So I guess what I'm saying is the injuries with Sale didn't start until the subsequent season. In the World Series year, he got hurt at the end. He wasn't the same guy at the end. A lot of people forget that. He wasn't. And then, honestly, he was never really the same after that. Sean in a car. Sean, go ahead.
Maz, thanks for taking my call. I have a very quick question for you. Last week, you and Felger were talking about Porzingis, and my friends and I refer to, we refer to Porzingis as the Chris Sale of the Celtics, as in, do you think, I mean, we all know both guys, when they're healthy, they're all-stars in their sports, but they're two superstars that we want to wrap in bubble wrap. Do you think both guys have been so injury-prone, not their fault, but that's going to cost them being in their prospective Hall of Fames?
Maybe. I mean, I don't think, to me, Chris Sale's not a Hall of Famer. I don't know how other people look at him. To me, he's not. He has 124 wins. He began as a reliever. He was really good during his peak, but the body of work is not good enough for him to be a Hall of Famer. Let me just add quickly, John in the car. John, go.
When did this become a thing, Tony, where we're going to cheer every person that used to play here for a couple of years? Between this guy and the other ding-dong that Tatum hangs around with that was all upset because he didn't get cheered enough when he came back from the Celtics. Why is this a big deal? It shouldn't be a big deal.
John, it's not a big deal. I'm just asking the question in the case of Sale, how do you remember him? That's all. It's got nothing to do with the cheering or the booing. It's about the legacy. How do you remember him? Do you know that starting in 2019, Jimmy Sale was 17-18 for the Red Sox? His final 5 years here, 19-20, 17 wins, 18 losses with